All right, let's get to the latest front in the battle between Twitter and the government of India. So there is something called the Digital Millennium Copyright Act of the United States, which basically says that if you violate a copyright, there will be repercussions. Twitter utilized this law to deny access to the IT minister of the country, Ravi Shankar Prasad, for an hour today. Mr. Ravi Shankar Prasad responded with a series of messages on Coup and then later on Twitter as well, saying that this was done because of the action that the government has been taking against all of these companies, including Twitter, and this has ruffled their feathers. But this action was not directed just at Ravi Shankar Prasad. Shashi Tharoor, Congress leader, also had his account blocked and then reactivated. Essentially, if any party feels that their copyright has been infringed by any post that you put out, they can complain. If Twitter finds it correct, they can deny access to you. If there are repeated complaints, they may even suspend your account. Now, interestingly, this is an issue that has resonated across party lines. Shashi Tharoor replied to Ravi Shankar Prasad on Twitter, ironically saying that, hey, I went through the same thing. Priyanka Chaturvedi, Rajya Sabha, a member of the Shiv Sena, also talked about how she's raised this issue. So what is the broader issue? Is Twitter at fault here? Are there a lot of gray areas in how these laws are worked out, or is this really vendetta? I'm joined now by Priyanka Chaturvedi to speak more on this. Priyanka, great to have you on the India development debate. Now, let me begin with what you have put out in the public domain today, saying that you faced a similar issue with Facebook. So, for example, if you've done any interview with a channel, any channel, like you're on this program, and then you put that out, and then we come and say this is an infringement of copyright, can that social media site then penalize you for it? And is that essentially, as an example, at the root of this controversy?
Absolutely. Actually, what the IT minister has gone and done is that he has missed the woods for the trees. Because clearly the problem is with us not having clarity with regards to our copyright laws, which match with the digital age that we live in. For example, when he tweeted what he tweeted, I had raised this issue when we discussed intellectual property rights, when we were discussing in our Commerce Committee meeting. I had raised this issue of how I was part of a debate on one of the brands, so-called brands which have copyright issues and they are licensed for copyright, in maybe not in India, but in another country. So all these platforms also follow a copyright act, a copyright policy that they have. So anytime that they get any issue is raised, they're supposed to bring it down. It's not like it happened with the IT minister, or IT minister feels offended because it happened to him. It has been happening over the years to many people. It could be people who are representatives in the parliament, in the assemblies, or individuals who have shared some content. So whether it's the DMCA, because it is in the US, so where the copyright has been registered is something most of the countries, whether it's European nations, whether it is US, they are following the copyright matter very stringent, very strictly. Somehow India is not looking at that option. And that is where the area where we should be looking at. But somehow it became about the platform versus the IT minister, and because he has raised some concerns about Twitter. So that is what I was trying to bring to the table, that the discussion is much larger in perspective. The discussion is about copyright laws that we create, understanding the digital platform.
It is larger. It is larger. You're absolutely right. And we should be looking at the issue as a whole. Now, part of the issue is also, if we don't have a clear direction or a policy on copyright issue, but Twitter does, and Twitter decides, for example, in this case, how it applies it. The question is about giving due notice before taking action. And that's part of the intermediate guidelines, that if you're deciding to block someone's account or suspend someone's account or deny access because of a certain complaint you've got, you should give that person a chance to explain their side of the story, very simply put. Do you agree with that principle in the intermediary guidelines?
Actually, if you look at the intermediary guidelines, 2021, Rule 4, Section 8 is what Ravi Shankar Prasadji tweeted. If you look at it, it categorically says point A and point B. It says any creator of that content can also be held responsible, or we can pull it down, but the creator of the content should know. Now, creator of the content is somebody who is an external person. You have let's say you participated in a TV debate, or you shared some video which had the content of someone who has copyrighted material. So that person is bound to raise that red flag and alert Twitter that this particular Twitter handle is using it, and you have to bring it down. Every social media platform has been informing people, which even Dr. Tharoor spoke about, that his Twitter account was blocked for 1 hour. And Twitter, I think there's an email which goes out from whether it's Facebook, where it happened with me. Facebook page pulled down my, one particular post and alerted me that we have pulled it down because of copyright violations. It has happened several times to me on Instagram, but I did not make it an issue, but I did raise it in the parliamentary platforms where we need to raise it and make people understand. But unfortunately, IT Minister made it more political in terms of his war with Twitter. Of course, Twitter has to follow the guidelines of India. Of course, it has to follow the rules of the law in this nation. But how are the rules of the law framed? Rules of the law have to ensure that a democratic framework exists and a regulatory mechanism is free and fair. So that in any manner that where we block freedom of speech or freedom of being able to voice our opinion is not blocked in any manner or is not biased in any format.
Yeah. So as a lawmaker, Ms. Chaturvedi, where do you stand on the intermediary guidelines and some very specific contentious portions of it? For example, removing end-to-end encryption where the requirement is and where laws are broken, or for example, making the platforms liable for anything that has been said on that platforms, removing their protective cover, which is again something that Twitter is currently facing. Where do you stand on these as a lawmaker? And forget about the political parties taking specific stands, because any laws made now will remain for much longer, no matter who is in power in the government. So as a lawmaker, where do you stand on these issues?
As a lawmaker is concerned, I have very categorically, I've in fact written a letter to the IT minister. This was way back before the intermediary laws came into action, where I had said that every platform, social media platform, which is working in India, which is doing business in India, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, for that matter, Twitter, they need to adhere to the norms of the nation. However, I also categorically mentioned that most of the countries, democratic nations where democracy is at peril, whether it is Australia, whether it is America, whether it is Singapore, whether it is Germany, European Union, so they have actually called these particular platforms, and they have also framed guidelines to ensure that there's some sort of accountability coming from them. But accountability that is coming from them should be to protect our democratic framework. It should not be to protect governments of the day. And that is where we are erring in our particular intermediary guidelines, where we make it more attractive for those governments which are in power to thwart freedom of speech, to thwart the right to expression, right to privacy in the garb of doing harm to a democracy. We cannot give such unbridled power, A, to social media platforms, B, to governments of the day, because these are elected governments of the day. They may be out of power 5 years from now. 5 years later, you may have another government which will misuse the same laws to ensure that there is no negative dialogue which is happening or any accountability coming from the government. So that is where I stand. I stand for accountability. I stand for all these social media platforms adhering to Indian laws. But I want Indian laws which are more contemporary in nature, which protect our democratic framework, which bring across a regulatory framework with all stakeholders having a voice and not being governed or chosen by the government of India to decide what works for them and what works against them. And that is actually genuinely a threat for democracy.
Absolutely.
As we know.
Policy. The politics of the day should be kept out truly when there is such important policy at stake which will have far-reaching effects, and which is perhaps why we see bipartisan support in some parts for the unbridled power that these social media platforms have, and on the other hand, questions about freedom of speech. Thank you so much, Priyanka Chaturvedi, for joining us and adding your perspective to this ongoing debate.
Thank you.